Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students from Government Degree College for Women Hateji. Right now I am addressing the students of class second year, and I hope you can recall, you can remember that before your Eid holidays we had started lesson number 12 of your book 2. The lesson is entitled Hitchhiking Across the Sahara, written by G.F. Lamb. I hope that you remember that this chapter gives us details about the travels of Robert Christopher, who was a young American, and he decided to travel across the Sahara Desert. Right. Sahara Desert, I told you, I had given you the introduction or the description. What is the Sahara Desert, what kind of desert it is? It is the largest desert in the world, and I told you what is meant by hitchhiking. I hope that you can remember it, and this chapter discusses the hitchhiking of Robert Christopher in the Sahara Desert and how risky it was. You might have got the idea in the initial lines, in the initial paragraphs or pages of this chapter, and in the introductory lines, the writer has told us that how the threats of Christopher's mother, foster mother, incited him to see this difficult and this complex place, that is the Sahara Desert. And he has also told us that what are the threats, what are the dangers, what kind of temperature is there, and it is so hot, it is too hot, and all the risks which are associated or which are linked with the traveling or especially hitchhiking in the Sahara. Obviously the writer has given us a very brief idea about it in the very first pages. Today we are going to read paragraph number 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this is fifth paragraph of this chapter, and it is on page number 49. Let's begin with this text of this paragraph. The driver added to the discomfort of the journey by relating details of a recent case in which 3 English people had attempted to cross a part of the desert in a car with only 1 day's water supply. I think that in the that you can recall that in the previous paragraph he has showed us that they were moving towards Golia, which was their first destination, which was Christopher's first destination, and he went over there. They were going over there, and meanwhile what kind of journey they had to encounter. The journey was difficult because the sand was too soft to bear the weight of the heavy truck, and they had to made a toil in order to move their truck on. And he tells us that the driver added to the discomfort. He increased the discomfort. The driver increased the difficulty, and he increased the threat of the journey by relating details of recent case, that he told some cases, some recent cases, and in that case there and they had attempted to cross the same part of right now, and they had traveled in a car, and they only had 1 day. Finally, what happened? Their car had become stuck in the sand dune. Obviously, as he told us earlier, that the sand was too soft, so their car was stuck in a sand dune. And 3 days later, their dead bodies like leaves, and they were just they just went to death. So were just dried autumn leaves. They had drained the radiator in their desperate thirst, as they were too thirsty, and they didn't have any water supply with them. So being desperate with thirst, with the feeling of thirst, they had drank the water of the radiator, and one of them tried to drain the oil from the crankcase, and even one of those 3 men, they had tried to drain from the crank case, obviously because of which they had died. Handout had been one of the search party, and he spared his listener none of the grim details. So the driver had increased their uneasiness, the uneasiness of his companions, by telling him all these details, these grim and serious details. The story came vividly to Christopher's mind on the second morning. On the very second morning, the same story became clear to Christopher. The greaser announced that one of the two goatskin bags of water had burst during the night. The greaser means the person who was accompanying the driver, who was a kind of engineer. Greaser is actually a kind of mechanic engineer, and he told us that he announced and he declared that two of the goat skins bags were just burst during the night. Even if everything went well, the rest of the journey would not be pleasant. And even if they had a pleasant everything pleasant with them, they had a smooth journey. Even if they had a smooth travel, they didn't encounter any other physical obstacle or any physical hurdle on the way, still their journey was to be unpleasant for them because they didn't have the water supply now. An outpost with a water supply was found on one of the Christopher's maps. So Christopher was having maps with him, and in that map they found that there was an outpost of water supply, and they set off towards it. Obviously they headed towards that water supply in order to get water for them. By dawn, they had gone 50 miles and dug out 5 more dunes, and and by dawn they just reached. They had crossed 50 miles journey, and 50 miles distance they had crossed, and they had passed, and then they dug out 5 more dunes and sand dunes in order to find water for them. Christopher was sick with thirst, and to add to his misery, he had jumped barefooted from the driver's cabin on one occasion, not realizing the intense heat of the sand. And Christopher was feeling thirsty, and his journey became even more painful. His condition got even worse because he jumped barefooted from the driver's cabin in mistake, and he didn't know the intense heat of the sand, and because of which, what happened is that it was as if he had jumped into a bed of hot coals, and the sand looked to him as if it was a bed of hot coals. With a scream of pain, he hopped back into the truck. So after realizing the hotness of the sand, he jumped back into the truck. Meanwhile, his thirst grew fiercer, obviously, because of the hot